So yeah, if you have a question, we're gonna have plenty of time for questions at the end of the presentation. So you can type it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself if you would like. So first question I have for you all, how much experience do you all have with pruning fruit trees? You can type it in the chat, or you can just yell it out if you want. None, zero, none, very little. All right, so y'all are some pruning rookies then. All right. So when you think about pruning your fruit trees, I mean, does that kind of scare y'all? Are you confident? Are you, scared you're gonna kill your tree or mess it up or anything? All right, Jerry Adley says absolutely. Very scared. Yep. So they say like the top fear, I think, among most people is public speaking, but pruning has to be a close second to that for sure, from what I've noticed. So I just thought about this, right? So this is a horror movie guy, Jason. So I feel like when people think about pruning their trees, they just get terrified, right? They just kind of see this in their head, like, oh my gosh, if I'm gonna prune my tree, the world's gonna end and I'm gonna kill my tree and all this type of stuff. So this is kind of the perception that I think a lot of people have about that. And I definitely don't want y'all to be scared about pruning your tree, because I mean, trees have been around for, a long time. They're pretty tough. So I want you to remember, pruning is not a scary thing. So this is just a basic definition of pruning. So all it is you're just removing a portion of the plant to create balance in that plant. So here, you just have a picture of a person pruning out, a limb. It looks destructive and scary and all that, but at the end of the day, this is just a basic task with having fruit trees. So why do we even want to prune fruit trees, right? So the first benefit to pruning trees is you're pruning them to help preserve good shape and form. So trees, trees aren't just, you plant a tree, it's not like a tomato plant. You don't plant it, this season, then it's done when the cold hits. But, trees are going to be around, typically for years and years and years. So you want to build up that tree by pruning it, making sure it has a strong shape and form so it can be healthy, so it can withstand winds and weather, things like that. Second benefit is fruit quality. So the fruit quality is going to increase with pruning, because pruning helps open up your tree to more sunlight. And just like, Superman needs sun to, feel strong, have a lot of energy, trees and plants in general need that sunlight to help with their overall health as well. Then you have a longer life. So if a tree has good shape and form, typically it's going to live longer, since it's also healthier, less likely to have damaged limbs. So when we have high winds or a rainstorm or something, if you have a strong structural tree standing outside, it'll help that tree withstand that weather. Less chances for disease. And that goes back to keeping the tree balanced, so there's enough sunlight in there, and that also helps with ventilation in the tree as well. And then, overall, here's a picture of an apple orchard, plenty of sunlight getting in there. So, think about pruning, don't think about this, don't get scared, don't get terrified, just think about a sunny fruit orchard here, so it is very beneficial to the trees. So one of the main things I talked about previously was the shape and form, right? So I got this picture here to also remind you that, all right, so if you want to buy fruit trees are typically going to grow pretty big, unless you have some type of dwarf variety that doesn't get as big. But, I have this picture here of this person's house, and they have these 2 trees planted, right next to the house. So at some point, they probably, bought these trees and thought, these are so small, I'm just going to put them here. 1 year pass, 5 year passes, 10 years passes, and then before you know it, these trees have become a problem. So make sure when you're buying fruit trees, you want to keep in mind that they do grow big, and part of the reason that you do prune them is to help control that size. Because if a tree is 40, 50 feet high or whatever, 20 feet high, it's a lot harder for you to manage and, of course, harvest that fruit. So the first thing you want to be aware of is making sure that you have the right tools. So these are pictures of a bypass scissor type hand pruner on the left, and then you got some lopping clippers on the right. These are just standard, pruning tools that you can find at your local garden store, on the internet or whatever. So these are going to be good starter tools for you to use. Now, you don't want to necessarily, just go to, say, the dollar store, for example, and pick up a $2 hand pruner. I mean, the saying goes, you get what you pay for. So you want to make sure that the products that you're buying are, they don't have to be of the highest quality, but they are going to be durable. They're going to be able to withstand many seasons, right? So these are going to be your standard starter tools. And then, so for your taller pruning jobs, you have your pole saw here on the left, and then you got a hand saw. So these are going to be for your bigger jobs. So once your trees get a little older, they may be a little taller, the limbs will be a little wider. You're going to need some heavier tools to prune out those branches. So with the right tools, you want to make sure that you also maintain them, right? So it's just like, your car, your vehicle. You may get a very nice one, but if you don't maintain it, then, it's not really going to last long anyway. So first rule of maintenance is making sure your tools are sharp. So an easy way to keep your pruning tools sharp is by using something called a mill file or a stone or diamond sharpener. And you can watch some videos basically on how to properly sharpen these tools, but it's really easy. Doesn't take long. But you want to keep those blades pretty sharp because you don't want something like this to happen, right? So this is a picture of someone who had some very dull pruning tools, most likely. And you can see when they cut into it, they probably had to like wiggle it and turn it and all that stuff to kind of get that cut right. And what they ended up doing was damaging these branches. And you can see that these branches started turning like a brownish black color, and they're most likely starting to get infected with some type of pathogen or pest. And overall, that's not good for the overall tree or the plant. So make sure you keep those tools sharp. Second thing you want to do is making sure they're clean. So sharp and clean are your best friends as far as your tools. So an easy way to keep your pruning tools clean is by using a bleach solution. And we recommend bleach mixture of 1 part bleach, 9 parts water. You can put it in a spray bottle, or you can just pour it in a bowl or something to where you dip your tools in. So the reason you want to disinfect your tools is because of diseases, for one. And right here, I have a picture of a very common disease in apples and pears. Have any of you all seen this before or know what it is? Anyone have a guess? Bingo. So Tonya got fire blight. Right. So this is a picture of a disease called fire blight, and it mainly affects apples and pears, and they call it that basically because it looks like, someone set your tree on fire. It looked like this tree was on fire at some point. So it turns everything black, and this disease can spread from tree to tree, very easily, and it can even, in some cases, kill the tree. And one easy way to spread it is by using a pruning tool and not disinfecting it. So So if you were to go right here and use your pruning tool, you cut off this infected part, and then you go to another healthy part of this tree or another tree without disinfecting, then you can easily pass this on to those trees, and then you have an even bigger problem. So the best times to disinfect your pruning tools are in between cuts when you're dealing with diseases like this for sure. And then when you're dealing with if you're going from different trees in general or different plants, because you don't want to spread things all around. So that's something to keep in mind. And then, so you have dead, diseased, and damaged branches on fruit trees. So in general, with fruit trees though, the best time to prune those are basically right now when they're still dormant. So you want to prune those in late winter. But if you have your fruit trees and you see any of them with damaged branches, like on the left, or dead branches or diseased branches, you can prune these out at any time, because these you can't fix these branches once they get to this point. So you can cut these off at any time of the season. So here's just a few key terms that you can just keep in mind when you're pruning. So this is just a quick diagram of the different parts of a tree. So we're going to talk more about these in general later. So the first term is the leader. So just like the name suggests, this is basically the main branch that is kind of leading everything in that area. So it's the most dominant branch. So the scaffold limbs are basically the limbs that kind of form the tree's body or framework. So then you got your water sprouts. Those are those branches that usually stick straight up. And then your secondary scaffolds still helping with the body. And then your crotch angles are basically the spaces in between the branches. So at these, you want your crotch angles to generally be between 45 and 60 degrees, because in that range, a limb is more likely to withstand winds and heavy storms and things like that. So it makes the tree stronger and more resistant to that branch being broken or damaged. Then you have the trunk, which is the main part of the tree, of course. And then the sucker sprouts, and those are sprouts that usually appear near the base of the tree, and they usually pop up throughout the season. So when pruning though, you want to keep this in mind also. You want to make sure you're cutting or pruning out your branches with the right angle. So the final cut that you make should be just beyond the branch collar. So this goes more for branches that are directly connected to the trunk. So here, this yellow line shows you the final cut. And then if you see this little raised part right next to the trunk, we call that the branch collar. So in that zone right there, or the branch bark ridge, that is where the tree is able to heal over cuts. So you don't want to cut into that zone, especially when you're cutting into bigger branches that are connected to the trunk, because if you cut into that zone, it's harder for the tree to heal that over. So over time, it'll develop something called woundwood. So on the left here, you can see that it kind of makes like a donut around where the cut has been made. So that's a good sign, meaning that person did a proper cut right there. And then a sign that you didn't do a proper cut is when that woundwood starts coming in, you can see on the right there that it doesn't make a full circle. So something to be aware of. All right, so pruning apples and pears. So the system that we recommend for pruning apples and pears is the central leader system. So the central leader system basically develops one dominant branch in the middle. And let me see. Don't have a highlighter. But yeah, so it develops one dominant branch in the middle of the tree, and we call that the central leader. and then you develop scaffold limbs around that central leader. So then that's how you develop that strong structure. So you can see in the before picture, they have selected the central leader, and then it has, a bunch of limbs around it. Then in the after picture, you only have 1, 2, 3, 4 scaffold limbs. Now we can look at that at the top down. So you're going to want your scaffold limbs to be somewhat evenly spaced around the tree. So you have 4 different scaffold limbs pointing in different directions, almost making like a cross pattern almost. So this is great structure for apples and pears. So this is basically what you're trying to accomplish. So when you go out and you buy your fruit trees, especially when they're dormant, they may look, well, they're probably going to look like this in this picture. And, most people will probably think, I'm not going to do anything to this tree because, I don't want to damage it or mess it up or anything. But this is the perfect time to start developing great tree structures at planting, especially when they're dormant. So at planting, you can see here, this guy has, a fairly large little tree here, has plenty of branches. But what you're actually going to do is you are going to cut most of that down. You're going to make one cut, and you're only going to have a little width, as they call it, about 24 inches to 30 inches above the ground. So then when that tree starts to sprout in the spring, it's going to start to develop branches under that cut, because what pruning does is it stimulates growth. So this is part of the reason why people are kind of, I guess kind of intimidated by it, because, you have this tree here and you basically cut all that off and you start from scratch. But if you start early, you'll be rewarded later. So now we can imagine that after we cut that younger tree and it's grown for the first growing season, you can see here these apple trees, they started to develop scaffold limbs. So you want to maintain those lower scaffold limbs evenly spaced around the tree. And you can see that it's easier for that tree to have those limbs pointing in different directions. It's not really cluttered on the inside. And then this person used limb spreaders to help develop those nice 45 to 60 degree crotch angles. So this is a neglected apple tree. So a lot of times people may move into a house, move onto a property, and they have apple trees that haven't been pruned in 20, 30 years, and this is what it ends up looking like. So from this picture here, you can see that, it's hard to kind of identify where the central leader is. You have limbs basically growing everywhere. It looks like a crazy hair day. So this tree has very poor structure. It's leaning over, probably because it bared a lot of fruit at one time, and the tree is not balanced. So overall, that is not what you want your tree to look like. So you want to keep it with this central leader system. So I have this virtual hands-on video to give you a more in-depth look at how to look at your apple and pear trees here.
Hi folks, I'm Elmer Kidd, Chief Production Officer at Stark Brothers Nurseries and Orchards Company. Today we're going to show you how to prune your fruit trees that require a main leader. The main thing of a tree that requires a main leader is it has a limb that's predominant over the rest of the tree. It's growing upright and it has predominance, so we want to maintain that in the growing structure of this tree all of its life. This morning we're going to open this tree up some. We're going to take out branches that are shading. We're going to take all the other limbs.
Yeah, so here, the first thing this person did was he talked about opening up the interior of the tree. So anytime you have limbs pointing inward towards the center of the tree, for example, think about when those trees have leaves. So those trees are gonna block sunlight towards the center of the tree. They're gonna block sunlight of other leaves and areas of the tree as well. So you wanna, so he's highlighting the fact that you wanna keep the interior of the tree pretty clear as well.
And point them in an outward fashion to where they're shaped like a Y, away from the main leader. The main reason that we prune older trees each year in the spring, it's important that the process follows year after year, is stimulation. You're keeping the tree in balance. You've got all this fruiting wood, and each year you get a flush of vegetative wood. You cut the vegetative wood back, take out the water sprouts, take out any sucker that would come from the bottom of the tree, but the main thing is to stimulate the tree. Wherever we cut a limb this year, next year that'll be spurred up, this becomes fruiting wood. When a tree's young, to get the limbs spread. That goes right along with what we're doing. Spreading limbs is vital to the future of the tree as pruning. So if you can do those two things, it'll pay big dividends later in the tree's life. Okay, we've finished the job. You can see that we've maintained the central leader. We've pruned all the limbs to grow to eyes that'll grow to the outside of the tree. We've balanced the tree to go into this season. And that basically is what this tree needed this year. A lot of people think that pruning and spraying and jobs like that are hard work. They're much easier than mowing the yard.
Yep, so that is summation of the central leader system. So if you have peaches and plum trees though, which were in Georgia, it's recommended that you use a whole different system for those, and that's called an open center system, or a base or a bowl system, if you will. So with peaches and plums, instead of having the primary central leader, you want the tree to look kind of like a bowl, or have an open center like a bowl does. So you can see here that basically you're developing about 4 to 5 scaffold limbs on these trees, all pointing outward in different directions, where they kind of make a bowl shape. So you can see here, for example, the first year they bought this peach tree, and you can see they cut out the center of it so you can keep that bowl area open. And then they left those 4 scaffold limbs to develop that bowl shape. So the second year, they did the same thing again by eliminating these interior branches and encouraging or stimulating the tree to grow outward. In the third year, you can see it again. They did the same thing over and over. So yeah, so at planting again is the best time to start training your trees. So this is a young peach tree here. So you can see that this peach tree has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 scaffold limbs and a central leader in the middle. So what you want to do, to develop that open bowl system, you cut off this central leader part in the middle. So now and then you cut off one of those scaffold limbs, and now you have your natural open center system right here. And this is about 20 to 24 inches off the ground. So then after the first year, this is how much it grew. And then, so you're going in again. So, you're eliminating those interior branches. You're encouraging those 4 strong scaffold limbs to be the foundation of your tree. And this is a picture of a nice peach orchard. And you can see all these trees here. They have, 3 to 4 to 5 strong scaffold limbs in different directions all around the tree. And that's how that tree continues to survive and produce healthy fruit. So here's a virtual hands-on video of the open center system, just so you can see it in action.
When pruning young trees, we're going to use a pair of hand pruners. I prefer to use a pair of what we call bypass pruners, where they have a hook and the blade, and when the cut is made, the blade bypasses the hook. These are two different styles that we use. Just make sure that when you prune your young trees that you're using a pair of sharp pruners that make a clean cut. Once our tree is planted, we need to start the pruning process. Peach trees historically have been pruned to an open center training system, and that's what we'll talk about today. When we start pruning our tree, we'd like our first branches to start approximately 18 to 24 inches above the soil line. Many times I'll use my knee and say I would like my primary scaffolds to be in this area here. Since the center of this tree will be open, we identify our first scaffolds, 3 to 5 scaffold branches, or major branches, what we call them. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 branches that I will use to be my primary scaffolds. At that point, I will cut the remainder of the tree, top of the tree out. We cut the tree out with a beveled cut. At this point, we still have 5 scaffold branches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would prefer to have 3 rather than 5, and here I'll cut out 1 more to come with 4 scaffold branches. At this point in time, I will head or cut the tips off each of these branches, approximately a quarter of those branches. When we make a heading cut like this, we stiffen the branch. We also encourage lateral branching behind that. In many cases, a peach tree will come as an on-branch shoot, or what we call a whip. The way to prune this tree is to identify where our scaffold branches will be required in this area here. Then we go up approximately 4 to 6 inches above where those required scaffolds are and cut the tree off. The reason that we go 4 to 6 inches above where those required scaffolds are is that the top 3 or 4 shoots that will grow this spring will be very upright, will be unsuitable to be used as scaffold branches. Those scaffold branches will either be broken off the top and left there as what we call a trashy center tree, or they will be pruned out the following dormant season. When starting young trees off, the reason that we cut 4 to 6 inches above where we like our desired branches is because the resulting growth from the heading cut, the top 3 or 4 buds are very vigorous and upright. As we move farther away from where the heading cut would have been in the previous season, the branches get a much wider crotch angle. Crotch angles are essential for having our major scaffolds because they'll be much stronger. If we would look at the top of this tree where a heading cut was made here, we look at the top 1, 2, 3 branches are very vigorous. Those would be ones that we would remove the next season. If not, if we look at these top 3 branches, when any force is put on there, it splits into the entire tree, losing the productivity of the tree. So what we would do is we would come back in after a heading cut in the dormant season. We'd get the top 3 or 4 buds to be very vigorous. Those would be removed at a later date, allowing the tree so we would still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scaffold branches. We may move the bottom one. If we look down from the top, we have 4 scaffold branches going off in 4 different directions. For more information on training and pruning fruit trees, you
can So that is the open center system in a nutshell. So with figs, you have yet a different system for figs. So you can prune figs in the tree form, where basically there are no lower branches near the bottom of the tree. All the branches remain in the upper part of the tree. However, this form isn't recommended for the metro area or the Piedmont area here in Georgia because of the threat of frost and how that may damage branches. So with figs, it's recommended that you prune these into bush form. So you can see this fig tree kind of looks similar to the peaches and plums, with similar to the open center system. So with the bush form though, when you have your, So when you have your fig tree, you're starting here to develop about 3 to 8 scaffold branches that are pointing out widely. So you can see here they have about that number. So they're developing 3 to 8 strong limbs that kind of form a bowl. and that's gonna form the structure for your bush form fig tree. Plus, this makes it a lot easier to harvest the figs since they're a lot closer to the ground. And just in case something does damage one of the limbs, you have plenty of other limbs that you can develop to replace that limb as well. So then with pomegranates, again, kind of another system. You have single trunk and multi-trunk. So with the pomegranate trees, if you have these, you can start to develop them with a single trunk system. So here you can see these trees are on the single trunk system. They have the single trunk, and then they have a few, about 3 to 4 scaffold branches from that trunk that bear all the fruit. But there, with this structure, this really helps out the pomegranate trees. And then you have the multi-trunk system, which, kind of looks similar to the peaches and plums, except these aren't branches per se. These are all trunks, different trunks coming from the ground. So here you have probably 7 or 8 different trunks coming from the ground and forming the structure of the tree. So these would be the 2 ways that you prune pomegranate trees. So in summary, with apples, pears, peaches, plums, figs, and pomegranates, first thing you want to do is you want to have confidence when you're pruning. So it's not all about the science. It's also kind of an art form, so you can't beat yourself up if you do something wrong. You want to make sure you have the right tools, that they're sharp, that they're disinfected, they're clean. Make sure you're using the right system for the right tree, and then just repeat what you learned in the beginning. And I have a quick poll here if you all can answer this for evaluation purposes. And then if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or unmute yourselves. Oh, this is a good question. So are there different rules for lemon and lime trees? So I'm not sure what the recommended system would be for lemon and lime trees, but I can definitely find out since we don't really grow a lot of them where I'm at. But if you send me an email so I can have your email address, I can give you an answer. And I just put my email address in the chat. It's bcrumsey@uga.edu. Let's see. Can a single apple tree produce fruit, or do I have to pollinate by hand? If so, how can I do it? So apple trees oftentimes need other apple trees to consistently produce fruit. So I guess it could be possible if you have one apple tree in your yard that it could start producing fruit. Maybe there's an apple tree nearby. So the best thing to do would be to make sure that you have compatible apple varieties near each other. And we have a chart showing the different pollination requirements for a lot of different apple trees. And I can send that to you as well, so you can kind of see that. If you send me an email, I can send you a copy of that. And same with you, Karen, with the kumquat trees, not sure about that. But if you email me, I can send you that answer. So how do you properly prune for espalier forms? I'm pretty sure we have a publication on that. So yes, if you can also send me email, I can send you some information on how to do that properly. All right, peacockmantis@yahoo.com. All right, I'm writing that down about the espalier form. Mantis@yahoo.com. Gotcha. My plums never get to ripe because they get eaten. I try to wrap it in bird netting, but still they got eaten. Is there any way to protect them from squirrels? Huh. Yeah. So, as far as squirrel control, you wrap them in bird netting. So I guess the bird netting was, I guess directly on the tree, and then you, I guess, kind of tied it up at the bottom. Yeah, and the squirrels still got through it. Yeah, that's a tricky one because, I mean, the best defense really would be a physical barrier, but we're talking about squirrels, and I wouldn't really recommend any repellents or anything. Yeah, with that, maybe with the bird netting, you might want to try to spread it out farther to where it's not directly on the tree, so there's space around the tree. I'm not sure how big your plum tree is, but I'd imagine if there was more space under the netting, like maybe if you staked them down around the tree and then you had something to kind of form a tent over the plum tree, then they would have a kind of a harder time trying to directly get through all that netting if it wasn't so close to the tree. Is there a tool sharpener that you recommend? I don't have any specific brands in mind, but if you look at your, your local garden stores or your tool shops, they would, I'm sure they'd have plenty of different products there that you could choose from and recommend. But that, it doesn't have to be anything fancy though. But all right, if y'all, okay, should I prune all branches that point straight up? Yes, so those are probably those water sprout branches that we talked about. So any branches that are pointing straight up like that, you can go ahead and prune those out. Yep, yep. So pruning is definitely a annual job. But yeah, if I would just get as many as you can at one time and then, you know, do it that way.